everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we're doing another Women of Horror Spotlight. Today I have with us, she wears multiple hats. She's a writer, director, author, producer. She does a little bit of everything. And she is one female author that's collaborating in a book that's called A Scream in the Night 3, an all-women horror story. And I have with us today Marjorie DeHay. Marjorie, welcome to the Horror Room.
Thanks so much, Travis. I am so excited to be here. You are such a great interviewer, and I think we're just going to have a really good time.
Oh, listen, thank you so much. This is definitely going to be a blast. So tell us a little bit about A Scream in the Night 3.
Sure. I actually have a copy hot off the presses. It ranked number 3 in anthologies on Amazon, so that's pretty exciting. And it was written by women, edited by women, put together by the amazing Raina Young, and I got involved with the project through Maureen Whalen. So these are amazing women. It was such a fun project, and each is so different. If you read the stories, they're very different concepts. Some are super scary, some are funny, some are, really edgy. So it was a really great collaboration.
It's amazing. Now tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh, sure. Mine is actually Bound by Blood and Moonlight, and it's actually, of course, a werewolf story, which I had never written before, but I thought it would be a fun take on werewolf is if you didn't really know you were a werewolf, and then you found out, but you're in high school, and then you have to deal with all the other things about high school. And what happens if you fall in love with somebody, and she does, she falls in love with the very popular girl, and then kind of what happens when you have to choose between something you don't understand, like being a werewolf, or love, like would you sacrifice one for the other?
And being a werewolf is an interesting story because it's unlike being a vampire, vampire, you're a vampire, you can always walk around at night. But a werewolf, you only turn into a werewolf, when there's a full moon. So to have to live your life around a full moon is a pretty interesting concept.
Yeah, it is a really, the whole moon, and I don't know if you've ever read, but I actually wrote a report one time about the moon and how the moon affects, there's more hospital admissions, there's more car accidents, there's more, just people go a little crazy on the full moon. So if you think just historically weird things that happen on the full moon, but just imagine one day a month you just black out and you don't know what happens. And what if you live alone? I mean, I always think hey, if you live alone, how long would it take for somebody to find me? Or, I live with somebody, but what if I lived alone? It's who would miss me? Because we're all so we don't see people on the everyday. Oh, you miss a Zoom call. People are going to be no big deal. You miss 5 Zoom calls. They might be oh, well, they're sick. So how long would it really take?
Yeah. And it's interesting you brought up, I actually work in the funeral industry. And yeah, when it's a full moon, we get busy. And the other thing you were talking about, I was saying for the longest time, my biggest fear was always dying alone because I've seen that. And, it could be something simple as, if somebody was there, they could have called 911 and you could still be alive. But if you live alone, you're just gone.
Mm-hmm. Kind of scary to think about. And then you always hear that, would your dog eat you or your cat eat you? And they always say your cat would eat you, but not your dog. But it's
And I have a cat too, so I think my cat would probably eat me.
Yeah, I mean, cats are kind of like that.
All right, so what got you into? Because you're a filmmaker, you're a director, and you're an author as well. So what got you into doing all this creative stuff?
Well, it's actually an interesting story. I've always been in the entertainment industry, but very much on the legal production side. So I worked at a big studio. I did a lot of legal stuff, but I always wanted to make films, but films seemed very challenging, hard, etc. to make. But technology kind of turned around and made it easier for people to do a lot more independent films. So in 2017, I actually got diagnosed with a brain tumor, which is kind of a crazy thing. If you think about it, you're going around in your regular life and then they're like, oh, you have a brain tumor the size of a golf ball. And then you're like, oh, wow, that kind of flips a little switch in your head and you're like, am I really doing what I love to do? And I've always loved horror films, so that kind of was the start of it. So I started doing short films and then did a feature film, Bottle Monster, which did really well for an indie. It was on a lot of the streamers. It got a lot of attention, but again, it wasn't like huge because it was during COVID, so you didn't get the big. I still have yet to see it on a big screen, which I really want to do. And then the next one we did was Immortal Thieves: The Bloody Heist, which we actually shot during COVID, which was very interesting because we always use SAG. We have a lot of friends in the industry. We really try to be very, very pro-union. And SAG was challenging because there was a lot of COVID protocols that you had to follow, which was fine. And we want everyone to be healthy. But at the end of the day, when you're an indie, you're like, it was really expensive.
Yeah.
but yeah, that's going to come out this year. So we're really excited about that one.
Now, I'm asking a question that I've never asked anyone before. As a woman horror filmmaker, author, is it tough to not be labeled, oh, she's just a woman horror filmmaker or a woman horror author?
I think, yeah, sometimes it's like, it's a weird dichotomy because like when you make anything, any kind of film, you know, you have the people who are like, yay, and then the people who just like troll you. And we had this one particular troll who was like, I've said this once and again, women should not make horror films. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're saying 50% of the population should not make horror films because you didn't personally like mine, which you kind of weren't the audience for, which is fine. But it was such a statement that, you know, really got to me because you realize like in this industry, there's so much, you know, there's so many challenges for so many people that don't get the recognition that they deserve. But to like blatantly exclude 50% or blatantly exclude 25%, I think it's just wrong because everybody has a story to tell. Everybody's got a great story in them. And whether they get the chance to tell it or not, that's the problem. And I like to see that the industry is kind of opening up a little bit. But I'm like, God, this industry's been around almost 100 years. Why has it taken so long?
I know. Because even when I started my YouTube channel, you know, I was like, there's not that many black guys who are doing horror channel. I mean, or anything talking about horror. Mm-hmm. It's always been a white male populated because, I mean, you think of horror, you think of white men. I mean, it's a natural thing, you know, that's been what you've seen since the beginning of time. And like, I was like, you know what? Let me give this a try because at the end of the day, we all experience horror. No matter what race, gender, sexuality, horror is something that's a part of all of us. We all have traumas and bad shit that happens.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you did because it's like, and I think of like Get Out as a perfect example is what if that story never got told? That is a brilliant movie. There are so many nuances. And, you know, if you hear interviews with Peele, he says like he had that script for like 7 years, put it down so many times. And his wife kept saying like, no, you need to tell this story. So he was lucky to have somebody behind him who said, yeah, you need to do this. And he took that leap of faith. And I think he just opened up the genre to so many new people, which is like Nia Costa, who's done a lot, you know, like Candyman, doing a lot of different things. But it's also that it's like opening those doors are so hard. But once the doors are open, people kind of start to open their eyes of how much talent there really is. So I'm so excited you did a YouTube channel because you're just awesome.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I did too. I mean, because, you know, I've been, you know, like debating on this for the last 3 years. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. And I was like, fuck it. It was like right after COVID, I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to fucking do it. And like, here I am.
And you're doing it.
1 year in.
Wow. What has been your biggest, like, kind of piece of knowledge or wisdom that you've gained from doing your channel?
Ooh. Okay, so like, I did not know how involved, you know, starting a YouTube channel is. I thought that you just hopped on and your friends and your family and everybody you know would subscribe and view and love all your stuff, and you'll get 1,000 views every video. It does not work that way at all. It is an absolute grind, and it's crazy because majority of my supporters and people who definitely back me are people I really don't fucking know. You know, they're indie filmmakers and people who I don't know like that. So it's crazy. So I would say to like anybody who's trying to start, especially a horror YouTube channel, because my channel was originally going to be like movie reviews and horror conventions, and then but that's so many people are doing that, and you have to find an, if you're going to do a horror YouTube channel, you got to find a niche, and like I found my niche, which is interviewing and putting a spotlight on indie horror. No one else was really doing that. I was like, oh, this is a niche that I can hop onto, something I enjoy, is fun, and people will watch and enjoy it, hopefully.
And I think people are. I think it's a great, because you're kind of surprised when you look through, you're like, why aren't more people doing that? And I think, you know, everybody knows the big horror film out. And then we found, like, actually what was so interesting, we were on like Vudu and Redbox and all of this, but it actually was Tubi that like a ton of people came and saw our film on Tubi, which, you know, because those are the people who are like, okay, I've seen all the mainstream stuff. I really want to know who the up and coming creators are, or something different, or I want to see something that, you know, was 20 years ago. And then they stumble upon your film and become fans. And it's been really, really cool to see like Tubi, which was, we wouldn't have guessed it.
Tubi is amazing. And that's where I started my channel, because I was a Tubi fan. I was doing Tubi Tuesdays. I would just pick a random indie horror movie and just review it. And yeah, I mean, Tubi has so much. I mean, like it has so much horror on it. I mean, no matter, and what I love about horror is horror has so many different subgenres. So found footage, slashers, the torture stuff, whatever your type of horror is, there's something for you. And Tubi just opens the door for stuff that most people wouldn't see because it wouldn't get into the box office. And the days, and I'm showing my age, I was born in the 80s, but the video store era was when you got to see a lot of indie horror movies that you normally wouldn't see, but that's dead and gone.
Yeah, there was something about going, and I mean, I guess I'm aging myself too, about going to the video store and you're like, oh, you're 10, and you're like, oh my God, look at this. And I guess I started watching horror when I was like 11. I think my first was Psycho, and then I went to, you know, all the slasher from like Sleepaway Camp, which I still think, you know, I tell people like what an amazing movie that was and how ahead of its time it was if you look back at it. And, you know, but Evil Dead still my favorite. How about yours? What was your favorite?
So my first horror movie I saw was the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and like my parents rented that and I watched it. But the one that really got me into horror was the original. Well, I'm wearing the sweatshirt, the original Halloween, the John Carpenter Halloween.
That's a classic.
It was an absolute classic. At that point, it really I really started getting into horror. But Freddy Krueger was the first horror movie character. He's my favorite horror movie character. That really like I was like, I like horror. I really fucking like horror, because with Freddy Krueger, I had the action figures as a kid. I had the T-shirts. I was a huge Freddy Krueger fan.
And that's great, because if you think about it, because we all dream, I just love the whole story of it. It's like, and there's always that philosophy, like if you die in your dreams, you die in real life, which, you know, scientists say you wake yourself up before you die, but, you know, it's like we don't know enough. Like, you know, we really don't know enough about dreams. So it's such a world that we experience every day, and to be in the horror of it. Because I remember after I watched that movie, I was like, what if he comes in my dreams? It's like every, like, you know, teenager was like, oh my God, what if he's there?
because every other horror movie character, you just don't go to certain places and you can avoid them.
Yeah.
But like, you can't avoid going to sleep. I mean, we all have to go to sleep, and like that's what's so terrifying about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. It's something that you can't run from.
Yeah, and I think that's true. It's always the like, you're like, why did they go, like Progressive did that whole commercial where it's like, let's go into this like running car, and they're like, no, let's go into the shed of chainsaws, because you know, it's like, why do people make bad decisions? And it's true. You get these, and you know, I always go back to the story. Is like, I was mugged one time by two guys in Beverly Hills, where I lived, you know, and I was like getting to my car. So it was very unexpected for me. And then people were like, what did you do? And I'm like, I fought back, which is the stupidest thing. Like every cop will be like, just give your bag, just do this. But you don't know how you're going to react in a situation. So they didn't get my purse. I actually ended up breaking a rib and like, you know, kind of like having a lot of like scars and stuff. And they're like, but people were like, what were you thinking? And I'm like, but I wasn't. And I think that's what happens in horror films is like, you know, and we do it at night. When you hear a noise at night, you don't dial 911. You go and you look, is there somebody there? And
that's true.
It's, you know, your instincts. And because you're like, what if I call the police and it's my cat? And you're like, and then I feel like an idiot.
Because we all say that we wouldn't do certain things. Like I was mugged one time.
Oh God!
I was mugged one time at gunpoint, and like so I did the complete opposite of what you did. I handed everything. I was like, "Here you go, have a good one." And like,
yeah, they had a gun. They didn't have a gun for me, but if they have a gun, it's like, here you go.
I was like, "Here you go, have a good one." I'm like, "This is not worth dying over." But I agree with you. But I mean, there's certain things in horror movies that I watch them, and I'm like, I'm never picking up creepy hitchhikers. That's something I'm never doing.
Yeah.
And I see people do it all the time, and I'm like, I would never do that. I don't go camping, and like I interviewed somebody recently, and I was talking about camping, and I don't know if it's a black person thing or not, but I've only been camping one time in my whole entire life, and like I was just paranoid the whole entire time, and from all those years of watching horror movies, I'm like, I'm definitely going to get murdered out here in the middle of nowhere. Like I have no cell phone reception. Any of that, but I mean, there's certain things that are don'ts, and like, but like I agree. You hear a noise down in the kitchen or somewhere, most people are going to go check it out before they call 911, and then at that point, it actually might be too late.
Yeah, that's the you know the problem. It's like when it's, but I do agree on that camping thing because if you think about it, it's like. The only thing protecting you from the outside world is this like thin canvas of a tent. You're like, maybe if it's an RV, I'd feel a little safer. Like,
yeah, I've done glamping like in RVs and like at cabins and stuff. But like even like bears, like if you go somewhere camping, it's usually an area that's filled with bears. Like, what is stopping a bear from like going into your tent and just eating you? Like, it's just there's no protection.
Yeah, nothing. If the bear's hungry,
yeah. All right. So shoot another question. So how amazing was it to be able to work with so many amazing women horror authors with this book?
You know, it was pretty cool because this is now the third one. So we've done this, you know, 2 other times and I keep going, when's the fourth? And they're like, that's what everybody says. They're like, because everybody got so excited about it. And it's, you know how it takes, as you were saying with the YouTube, it takes some synergy. So it was really cool that this one hit high on Amazon because, you know, that's what you want because you're finding your audience, you're finding your niche, but it's also fun to go when I meet with people in the industry or I'm talking about movies, I'm like, oh, here's my book. And then they take the book and they put it on their bookshelf. So then they think about you every single day of their life.
See, I mean, I can, like, listen, yes, I made this YouTube channel, but I've never made anything like a book or a movie like that people can put somewhere and your name is on it. And that must be an amazing feeling.
It is. I mean, it is cool to just get it in the mail because it was something that, like, you know, you have this like bucket list of things you've always wanted to do. And I always wanted to like write a book or be part of a book and make a movie. So, you know, you kind of start to like check those things off. And anybody who's listening, if you want to make a movie, make it when you're like 20 and have all the energy in the world because it's like, and I wish I had done that, you know, this and my producing partner, Paul Overacker, we wish we had started like this 20, 30 years ago, but you couldn't. Like, it was so expensive. It was like, even to make like any type of film, like, you know, 20 years ago was very prohibitive. So, but now it's like, oh my God, like Samsung's cameras are like so much better than iPhones, but you could shoot a film on a camera
really
now, and it would look amazing qualities. I mean, I watch YouTube a lot and these people who, you know, these, you know, 20-year-old guys and girls guys and women who do these amazing special effects videos. They're like, oh, I taught myself. And you're just like, it's as good as Marvel. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's like, there's so much talent out there.
And you hate on them too, right? Because I definitely hate on them. I'm like, I kind of wish I did this YouTube thing in my 20s, because I feel like I'm behind on technology. And I see people with YouTube channels and they got fucking special effects flying in the background and this and that. And I'm like, I don't know how to do any of that. So I'm like slowly teaching myself every day how to like do this. But it gets hard when you get older and you have real life responsibilities, a full-time job. And I agree with you. Like, if you have something like this that you want to do, definitely do it in your 20s when things are a little bit easier.
Yeah, like you don't mind, like, and it's also like this, I talk about, and again, like going to Europe and staying in a hostel, and then that movie Hostel, and you're like,
I know,
right? After that, I was like, but now it's like, when I go stay in a hostel, I'm like, well, definitely not after that movie, but, it's like things you did in your 20s that you didn't care, it's like, oh, I'll walk the streets of New York City at 4 a.m., who cares, nothing's going to happen to me because I'm in my 20s, so, but that's also like, you don't have the fear of failure, you just can like throw things out there and just be okay if people like it or not. Like, I feel like over time, it's like I'm more sensitive than I was in my 20s. So I'm trying to lose that. It's like, when somebody says something bad, you take it very personally. And now I'm like, okay, now it's one person who probably hasn't, started a YouTube channel or done anything. That's always the critical one. Everybody has a voice on social media. So you really got to kind of tune that out after a while.
You definitely did, because it will beat you down. Eventually, it will beat you down, and actually fuck with your creativity.
Yes,
if you pay attention to the negative comments and reviews. All right, so as you know, this is a horror channel. So I'm asking 3 random questions. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready. Let's do this.
Okay. Which iconic horror movie character do you feel like you relate with the most, or to the most? You're like, you know what? I see where they're coming from.
Gosh, that is a brilliant question. I've got to think this through, because there's there's so many horror characters where you're like, when like one thing, like it's like when you get in a car accident, you're more likely to get in a car accident, and things like all of a sudden, like when you're on that spiral of downward, it's like, so, you feel like almost any character, any, protagonist, you've lived that. Like, so if we were to take Halloween, it's like, okay, she just wants to have a babysitting job, she just wants to make extra money, and then it's like all this stuff happens and you're like, but I just wanted like $10 to go see a movie or something. And you feel like, I feel like everybody's life is a bit, as we were talking before, a bit of a horror movie, because it's like you think like everything's going to be fine, and then like something, and it's never anything you expect. It's always something like, well, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
So, gosh, I'm going to think on that one, but I'll get back to you. Okay. So I can't think of one, but I think it's everyone.
and I would say too, we all feel like, even like with the Killers, we all feel like we've been pushed to the edge or somewhat, but we don't necessarily go to killing. So like, we can always feel like, oh my goodness, I've been to that point where somebody or something was pushing me so far to the edge. I thought about, oh, I would love to kill that person, but we don't actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even the movie, it's not a horror, but Falling Down. I don't know if you remember that, but Michael Douglas, and it's in LA, and it's just everything goes wrong, and he just kind of like breaks one day, and it was a bunch of little things. It wasn't so much a big, losing his job, but it's like they all added up to that breaking point. So I think we all have that. Yes.
There was one out recently. It was a couple of years ago. I can't even think of the damn name of the movie, but Russell Crowe was in it, and it was like it was like Falling Down was a horror like thing. It was gory as hell, and Russell Crowe, he has a lot of stuff. His wife has divorced him. He can't see his kids. He lost his job and all this. And one lady cuts him off in traffic, and he just fucking snaps.
Yeah.
And he starts chasing her and killing people. And it was just that one little thing just pushed him over the edge.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that happens in LA, and you're like, how do people like get that upset? But then you're in the car, and you're like, why'd you cut me off?
Exactly.
So it's human.
What is one iconic horror movie that people say that they absolutely love, and you're like, it's okay?
Yeah, like I like Rob Zombie, but like House of a Thousand Corpses, where people are like, "Oh my god, it was so." I was just like, when it gets too much of that torture gore, it was a little much for me. So that's one that people are just like, "Oh my god, that's so great," and I'm like, it's not that it was a bad movie, because I think he's very, very talented in what he does and his interpretations. But for me, when it gets a little too like extra gory, that's when I'm like, Yeah, so that was one that I thought was a little too much.
I agree with you with the House of a Thousand Corpses. I see a lot of people say they love that movie. It's okay. It's not a bad. I won't say it's a bad movie. It's okay, but to me, it drags a lot. That movie drags a lot before you start getting to stuff, and like it's. I'm not that fan. A big Rob Zombie fan. I like some of his movies, but like I just don't like the dialogue and.
Yeah, he's in it for the kills and the gore. Yeah, that's
yeah. All right, last question.
Okay.
And then we're going to go back to the first one.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Who is your favorite final guy? Your favorite final guy. So he's the last survivor in a horror movie.
Oh, well, I'm a big Bruce Campbell fan, so it's like that. There's like hands down Bruce Campbell, Evil Dead, one of my favorite
That's
films.
Right, Evil Dead, yeah.
Evil Dead, because like there's something about it, and what I love, I mean, I think he's such a fun actor. It was such a crazy film that they made, because they were like, Bruce Campbell's parents actually took out a mortgage on their house so Sam Raimi could finish it. And I mean, there's all this backstory about how it even got done, and then it became such a huge phenomenon. But I think what I like about him is like all this crazy stuff happens, and then all of a sudden he laughs, because it's like, when everything goes wrong, all of a sudden you're in this like laughing fit, and you're like, but everything's horrible. And you're like, and then you say the worst thing. You're like, well, it couldn't get any worse. And then of course it's a horror film. It always does. So he's always been my favorite final guy.
I mean, he is the definition of the final guy. He is the OG final guy, 100%. Now, why do you think in most horror movies, it's always a final girl for the most part? It's always a woman that survives.
I've always wondered that, and I don't know if if they're going towards like, they say like the movie industry is driven by, teenage boys, like what, because teenage boys, they take dates out, they go to Marvel movies, they go to horror movies, and that like, they're the biggest purchaser of tickets. So I think sometimes, having the final girl is like, it's like, oh, she's pretty. I want to date somebody who's feisty and fun and, who could survive, So I think a lot of it may be going to, tailoring it towards a particular, audience.
That's a good. Yeah. Cause I mean, if you think about logically, boy, I hope I don't get myself in trouble for saying this, but women would use their brains to outsmart horror villain like Michael Myers, or they wouldn't use brute strength or force. And so when I see that, I'm like this, that's interesting, because like, these 6 guys just got done fighting, firefighters just got done fighting Michael Myers, and he whipped all the asses, and then Jamie Lee Curtis comes by, 7 years old, and whips his ass, and I'm like, well, how is that possible?
Yeah, and it's because like if you're strategic and smart, you'll probably win against like brute force, because like she couldn't win against brute force because he was like basically unkillable. So you have to be, smart enough to figure out what's going to actually take him out in the end. Because I can't remember the very last one, but the final one.
She beat him with brute force. She beat him with brute force,
okay.
Which made no sense.
Oh, on the kitchen table, right? Yeah.
Which made no sense to me. I was like...
But it's also, she's been doing it for 48 plus years or 30 years. So she was like, I think once you go through something like that, you take like self-defense, or you're like, you spend your life like, the Terminator. I often think it's not quite a horror film, but Sarah Connor and when they start the second one, she's doing all these push-ups and she's totally ripped because she's like, hey, if he's coming back, I'm going to be ready.
But that's the reason I like that one the least, just because in every other Halloween movie, Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis, she used her brains to outsmart Michael Myers, and that's how she was able to get the upper hand. And in this one, she's whipping his ass in the kitchen. I'm looking like, that's not Laurie Strode. Laurie Strode is, she's not ass kicker. She uses her brain to outsmart Michael Myers. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't, and I think of all the ones, I think that probably got it was like of all the ones, because they've gotten like really great reception or mixed reception. I think that was if they rated them, that got like, because nobody wants to see Michael Myers dead because it's definitely the end. So there's some of that, but I think people probably agreed, that like if he's gonna go, you feel like that was not how he's gonna go. But then when you think it's like, if you're a final girl, it's always got to be a face-to-face confrontation to make it genuine.
I agree. All right, Marjorie, where can everyone find you?
I am on Facebook, Marjorie DeHay. I'm on LinkedIn, Marjorie DeHay. I have the, I guess, luck that I have a unique name that nobody else has, but then I also have the problem that anything on Google is probably about me. So can't hide. So those are like the ways, best ways to probably get a hold of me. And I really try to, if people reach out, I always try to get back because, we've all been there. We've all been like, hey, I just want a question or a piece of advice. So I try to be as helpful as I can, because I hope that everybody passes that on.
That's amazing. Marjorie, it's been an absolute blast having you on. Listen, you can come back on for Screaming the Night Part 4, 5, 6, 20. Listen,
absolutely.
I hope it goes that far.
I hope it. Right, I hope so too.
I know. Let's just keep it going on, almost like Halloween movies. Let's keep it going on. I mean, if it's doing well, if it's good ideas and good, let's keep it going on. Let's not end it.
Yeah, I think it is. I'd love to see these. I'd love to see this turned into like a TV series of short, like horror. I know they've been trying to do that, but I mean, it'd be great to have 10. I'm just throwing out to the universe. A bunch of women making and doing horror films, and but not just women. A bunch of people who love horror. So that's why I never want to just say it's about women. I think it's just about anybody who loves horror getting together and making a film. And I do always like to kill my friends, Travis. So if you ever want to die in a horror film, I'm sure I can make you die.
Marjorie, listen. I say this a lot. I want to be killed as many times in horror movies as possible. So if you ever roll for me to die, I will be there.
Awesome. I love to kill my friends. I'm like, and it's so funny. I really have killed a lot of my friends in fun and interesting ways. But how would you die? You have to, think about that. Like, how would you want to die in a horror film?
How would I want to die in a horror film? So,
yeah.
I'm going to be making an announcement next month sometime. So I am going to be in my first horror movie, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. But if I was going to die, I would want it to be pretty gruesome. Like, I would want like a horror scene where people was like, oh my goodness, he was the guy who got his dick cut off and shoved in his mouth or something. Like, I want it to be something so fucking fucked up and gruesome that people are like, I remember that scene and I know that guy.
Yeah, it was like, we're talking about Saltburn, and there's a couple scenes in Saltburn that you'll just remember for the rest of your life that didn't need to be in there, but then you're like, well, because they were in there, people remembered it. It was just so shocking. So yeah, shocking death is the key.
Yes, so. I don't want to be off the screen killed or anything like that. I want something gruesome and fucked up. The people are like, I remember that guy and I remember that scene. Okay, we're gonna be Travis Bruce, gruesome death. Yes. Don't put me to. Now, don't give me the whole dick in my mouth thing. I'll just make that. He's like, no. I mean, I was giving you an example of that level of fucked up type shit. Yeah. I got that. Yes. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the horror room. Oh, by the way, go out and go to Amazon and grab A Scream in the Night
see if
Part
I can-
3.
Ooh.
Grab it,
Yes.
grab it, grab it.
Grab it, grab it, grab it.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the horror room. I'm Travis Bruce. See you guys next time. Take care.